Okay, so now let's talk about gauge swatch analysis and why we do the gauge swatches in the first place. Let's make good use of our time here. I've got two swatches. The first one I did with the size 6 needle, and that's what the pattern calls for. But when I did that, I got 23 stitches for 4 inches and 28 rows for 4 inches. Whereas the pattern says I should have 20 stitches and 28 rows. So that's not going to work. So then I did a second swatch with a larger needle, and I knew to go to a larger needle. Let me talk about this a minute quick first. Instead of looking at how many stitches I have in 4 inches, I'm looking at how many stitches the gauge 20 stitches will give me. I'm looking at the length of that. So when I do that and I see that my 20 stitches will only give me 3.5 inches, then I know that I need to go bigger. It's easier for me to decide whether I need to go to a bigger needle or a smaller needle if I go by the measurement and not by the number of stitches. So because when I measured my 20 stitches on this first one, here, let me show you. If I come up here, let me find this here. And I'm starting not at the beginning of my measuring tape, but I'm starting at the 1. I find it's more accurate that way. So if I go to the 1 and I measure my 20 inches, you can see I would get to 3.5 inches there, which means it's not big enough, which means I need to go to a bigger needle. Okay? All right, so then I did a size 7 needle. Here's the size 7 needle with all my little counting threads in it. And when I measure this after washing and blocking it, I get, let me put this here, I get 3 7/8, I would say. Let me come down and check this one. Yeah, that's pretty consistent at 3 7/8. Well, that one there. No, wait, the mark is here. That's not going to help me. All right, so I'm getting 3 7/8, which means that my actual number of stitches per 4 inches is like 20.5. If I come up here and I look at where do I have to go to get to the 4 inches, it's not quite one more stitch, but we'll say it's 21. All right, so that means my actual, after washing it, I have 21 stitches. And when I count my rows, which is interesting to me because it actually got smaller and not bigger. And I think the first one was that way too. When I count my rows, it's just about, well, it is spot on 4 inches again. So 28 stitches. So that's what I'm getting for 4 inches. All right, so now let's look at the fabric itself. I've got this is the size 7, this is the size 6. When I look at the size 6 first, you can see it's got, the stitches have a nice uniform look to them. It's got some stretch to it, but not too much. It's not see-through. It's got a nice handle. It's got a bit of a drape. It's not real stiff. It's not super loose and soft, but it's not real stiff. I really like the fabric I get with this one. All right, so this is the size 7. And if I look at the size 7, and let me do this just to make this easier. At this point, there's no reason to keep this counting stitch, counting marker, thread, whatever you want to call it, in here, because I've already measured everything. I've got what I need from it. So let me just pull some of this out. Let's go to here. All right, now I can look at it a little easier. Again, it's got really nice stitch formation. I love the way the pattern, this yarn was really nice to work with. I love the way that the fabric looks. It lies, it's got a really lovely feel and drape. It's definitely a bit thinner, not as thick as the other one, not as dense, I guess is the better word for it. But it has a lovely feel to it. Again, it's not see-through. It's nice and stretchy, and you can see if I stretch it out, it becomes a little more see-through. See that? Whereas with this one, if I stretch it out, it's a little bit, but not nearly as much. So this one has a little more, what do I want? It'll lay a little drapey. I guess I'm repeating myself, but it has a good drape to it. So here's what I'm looking at. I had originally been debating between making the anchor sweater as a cardigan versus as a pullover. And what I'm coming to the conclusion is if I want to make it as a cardigan, I'm going to use the size 6 and make this denser fabric. But if I want to do it as a pullover, I'm going to use the size 7 and use the little more drapey fabric. We talked about this, the group of us knitting together, that when you wear some sweaters or jackets and you sit down and they're stiff, they like bubble out. They don't lay nice. So if I'm going to do a pullover, I'll use the size 7. So let's see what that's going to mean for me in terms of my knitting and how that's going to work. So for swatch 1, I got 23 stitches in 4 inches. Well, that works out to be 5 3/4 stitches per inch. All right. Now, the pattern, when I look at the pattern, and I had to go to, I think it was page 4 to find the total number of stitches in the body. So in the body, for an extra small, let me find this, it's 184 stitches. For a small, it was 192. A medium is 204. A large was 212. An extra large is 252. Nope, wrong, 232. And double XL was 252. 3XL was 272. All right, and I'm just going to stop there because it'll go on forever. So my bust, you don't need to know this, but my bust is 40 inches, and the sweater says we should have 2 to 4 inches of positive ease. That means I want a sweater that's between 42 and 44 inches. So if that's the case, then to get a 42-inch sweater, I'm going to do 42 times the 575. And when I do that, I get 241 and a half stitches. If I'm going to have 44 inches, 4 inches of positive ease, I multiply these two together. When I do that, I get 253 stitches. All right. Now, that being the case, if I stick with my size 6 needle and I'm knitting the sweater the way I'm knitting the swatch, to get a 42 to 44 inch sweater that will fit me, I need to be at the body part of my sweater between 242 and 253 stitches. Well, when I look up here, the double XL pattern is the one that I should be making in order to get the sweater that's going to fit me around the bust. Now I'm going to take careful measurements when it comes to the length because I don't want it to be super duper long. My my gauge was not that terribly off. So what I will probably end up doing, I think the 40-inch sweater, was that the extra large maybe? I think the 40-inch sweater was the 42 to 44-inch sweater would have been the extra large. So I need to bump up a size to make this work. All right, now let's look at swatch 2. All right, so here I'm at 21 stitches. So let me do my math. Hold on a minute. Should have had this part done ahead of time, but I don't. So 21 stitches for 4 inches is, I should have known this. So for swatch 2, it's going to be 5 1/4 stitches per inch. So if I want a 42 to 44-inch sweater here, I'm going to do the 5 1/4 times 42. So that's 221 stitches, 220.5, or hold on, 231. So looking at this one, I'm somewhere, the large is at 212 stitches and the extra large is 232. I like my sweaters to be looser, so I would opt to make the extra large. Interestingly enough, when I did the sample sweater, I made the extra large and it does fit nicely. I hate the fact that we're going by these extra large 2XL, 3XL stuff because the designer's measurements for here are, the sizes are like a size off from what I'm used to for what I'm like. I typically would knit a large for myself, but for this pattern I knit an extra large and you can see why it worked out that way. So what I'm going back to now then is if I want to make the cardigan, I'll use the size 6 and I'll use the double XL pattern. If I want to make the pullover, I'll use the size 7 and I'll make the extra large pattern. That's what's going to give me a sweater that's going to fit me the way I want it to fit. I'm not talking about length yet. We'll talk about length as we're knitting. But this is how I go about deciding what size I'm going to make and what I'm using the swatches for. So there you go. This is why we swatch. This is what we use the swatches for. The other thing I'm going to keep in mind, I'm going to keep my swatches as I'm knitting so that I can kind of keep an eye on, I don't know, perhaps just reinforcing for myself that what I'm knitting is going to look the way these swatches look. The difference between the swatch off the needles and the swatch after it's been blocked is phenomenal. As I said before, you can see the difference in how much this yarn puffs up and fills in. The stitches are so nice and even and laying so smoothly. I really like the way this yarn is working so far. So that's it for swatching.